This is verse 365 with Mack, John McMullen Jody McDonald. We've got Dave Zingara from NBC Sports Philly to jump in with us in less than 20 minutes from now. Johnny Mack, were you covering the Birds in 2013, or were you still in Minnesota at that time?
I was not. 2015.
15 is when you came back. So you were not on the beat when the Eagles under Chip Kelly had Coach Bill McGovern on the staff, linebacker coach who Chip had become friendly with where they were playing college football in Massachusetts / New Hampshire and New England at the same time. I guess they competed against each other, pass course up there, because he was hired as the Eagles linebacker coach in 2013 and reunited with Chip Kelly this past year at UCLA. And he passed away yesterday at the age of 60. That's young. With we have to deal with this as sports guys. Anybody who works in the media for whatever way, shape, or form, you lose people, and we're seeing guys who pass away at the age of late 80s and 90s and the like. And I always say, hey, they lived a pretty good life. If you make it to the 80s or 90s, you did well for yourself. 60 is young. When I have to report the passing of an individual who's younger than yours truly, that makes you pause. And I didn't know Bill McGovern. I knew of Bill McGovern as a linebacker coach, and I went on afterwards, had never coached in the NFL before Kelly gave him a job in 2013, went to the Giants after that, went to the Bears, was on Sean Desai's staff in Chicago, and last year he reunited with Chip Kelly, and mid-season at UCLA, he was decided to step back from his position to take a kind of a overseer type role because the cancer was kicking in. We send our condolences out to Bill McGovern's family and any of his friends and any of the people who work with him when he was in Philadelphia. 60 young, Johnny Mack, for someone to...
Yeah, way too young. And I was just looking because I saw it come across yesterday, and I saw UCLA confirmed it. He started his coaching career. He's a New Jersey guy, started at Penn way back in the 80s. So, it's always disappointing. I saw Jeff Stoutland tweeted out a photo of the two of them together. It's always sad. It's always sad. And he was here in 2015. But by that point, I really didn't start covering the Eagles till 2016 on a daily basis. So I just missed him. But everybody spoke so highly of him, continues to speak highly of him. And that's a fraternity, coaches. And that's why I brought up Stout, tweeting out a photo. It's always sad. And, Mike brought up a good point about when we were talking about the coaching staff and just how close, Nick is with Shane Steichen and Kevin Patullo and those guys. And it becomes a camaraderie thing. And sometimes when you lose it with somebody, it's tough to get it back with somebody else. So I thought that was a good point by Mike. But yeah, really sad news, especially that young.
And different coaches have different staffs, have different relationships. Some are more business-like, some are more friendly. And when you lose two guys who are pretty high up there on the charts, you had something that you have to deal with that the Eagles are going to deal with kind of on the fly because they're not doing as much offseason work as some other teams. Let me ask you about linebackers on this team this year, Mack man. We know that they're, as of right now, a little light on the depth on the linebacker side, and they're putting some significant chips in on Nakobe Dean. I think they'll cash those chips because I'm not big a fan of the player, but he played all of 35 snaps last year. They've got a new linebacker coach, too. We're talking about continuity of the staff. Nick Rallis was Jonathan Gannon's handpicked choice to join him out there in Arizona as his defensive coordinator. How do you feel about the Eagles getting a less than up to snuff group ready with a new positional coach at linebacker as well?
Yeah, I keep waiting. I keep waiting for that, and there's plenty of time. And we learned from last season with C.J. Gardner Johnson on the eve of the regular season. It can go deep into the process, but I expect him to add something at linebacker. I do. I think they have their fingers crossed with Christian Ellis, and I think they see some upside there. And I have no problem with that. But Howie himself has used that term. Hope was not a strategy. Um, and right now, you look at Nakobe Dean and Nicholas Morrow as the starters. Christian Ellis, Sean Bradley as the top backups if you want to throw Davion Taylor in there because he has a history with that new linebackers coach, DJ Elliott. Um, maybe, but yeah, we always joke about Peter King when he came out with his power rankings, can't find a weakness. He didn't look at the linebackers. He didn't look at the linebackers. And that's not I'm with you with Nakobe Dean. That's not an insult to Nakobe Dean. I'm not worried about Nakobe Dean. Now, I think there's going to be some startup cost, the term I always use, but I think he's going to be a good player. But after that, oof, we're back in the Eric Wilson territory.
Right. And one name that you threw out, I asked you about him yesterday, and you kind of almost laughed at me, and I guess I deserved that. Daveyon Taylor. Maybe because he was a draft pick, and I have been following the Eagles forever, and I certainly the Howie Roseman era, and how it seems to me every once in a while that they'll go further than you would expect them to go because of where a player was drafted. I get it with first-round draft picks, and I give Howie credit because he moved on from Jalen Rager as quickly as he did. Acknowledge the mistake, move on, correct it, go in another direction. The Eagles under Howie Roseman have, at least in my estimation, given a little bit more deference to a guy who is a draft pick, and whatever round he is in, the higher the round, the more deference they get. This kid has done nothing. And we knew when he was drafted, it was all about the athleticism, the tools, that he was still learning to become a linebacker. Well, if you can't get the tools to become a football productive player on the field, who cares what the friggin' tools are? And Davion Taylor, if ever there's a year, if ever there's a time, if ever there's a spot for meaningful snaps to be grabbed, it's this year for Davion Taylor. You got any faith he's going to be in the mix for the Eagles linebacker play this year?
Well, I do and I don't. I do if they don't make a move. I mean, why not if they don't make a move? Because you mentioned that athleticism. I do think people forget in 2021, when he started a little bit before he got hurt, he was starting to show some signs. He was aggressive. He was a hard hitter. He was physical. Obviously, he's fast. Um, had 2 forced fumbles, and he had that big forced fumble in Denver that Darius Slay famously took to the house. It and then he got hurt, and then it was nothing. When I kind of chuckled, it was, I think you said, is he guaranteed
Is he a lock to make the team?
No. And then I said, he was already on the practice squad last year. They cut him, and they brought him back to the practice squad. So, he's going to have to make this team in training camp. And could he make this team right now? Hell yeah. If they bring in a Patrick Queen or somebody of that nature, probably not. So right now, I would be rooting, if I were an Eagles fan, I would be rooting for Davion Taylor to show up and just outplay Nicholas Morrow, because at least there's an upside there.
Yeah, but how much upside is there if you go from you did a good job, almost like a PR person, of highlighting what he did in 2021, as limited as it may have been. There were a couple highlights.
Well, because that's the
He's
last
on
time
the
he
practice
played.
squad last year, Johnny Mack. That's a pretty big
Yeah.
fall from grace from, hey, this guy's making plays. He could we can't even keep him on the
Well,
53-man roster. He's on the practice squad.
because, well, two reasons. One, that's the last time he played. And two, he was on the practice squad because the Eagles had good linebackers last year. Well, they had one really good linebacker. They had one guy who was a competent starter to the point where they couldn't get their valued rookie on the field at all in Kaiser White. And then you had Nakobe Dean. They had linebackers last year. So it's more like if Daveyon Taylor is on the practice squad with this group, then you might as well cut him. If he can't make this team as it stands today, you might as well cut him. But I mean, TJ's not here. Kaiser's not here. The only one that's here is Nakobe Dean. And Christian Ellis showed some signs on special teams. And Sean Bradley's a good special teams player. Special teams. They need a linebacker.
And let me ask you about that, because again, reverting back to Davion Taylor didn't catch my eye when he was a college player, and we Eagles took him in the third round. I said, yeah, I recognize the name. I couldn't really give you much about his game. And everybody, Rick Saratella et al., freakish athlete, freakish athletically. Isn't that how you become a good special teams player? That you're a freak on athlete, you're a freak athlete, you get downfield, shadow block, all that stuff, and yet you got the Ellises of the world jumping over him, and Bradley, who was picked later than him, being better special teams player. What is it that he brought to the table last year?
Nothing. That's why I was on the practice squad. But again, it's a different landscape. You remember? I'm going to give you a name because you're a big college guy. You remember Dontarius Thomas?
Yeah.
Really, his second round pick from Auburn. Amazing athlete. I mean, ridiculous athlete. And, you know, the Vikings drafted him when I was there. And I remember that this guy is going to be the best nickel linebacker. And he ran, you know, Davion ran like a 4.49. He ran like 4.45. I mean, he was absurd from an athletic perspective. At 240 pounds, this is back in the days when linebackers were linebackers. That's what he was running at 241 pounds or whatever. He was also a smart kid. He got like absurd SAT scores, huge grade point average. He's so smart. He's so athletic. Had no football instincts whatsoever, Jody. Every false step and obliterates the 4.45. You know, it doesn't matter. If you're going in the wrong, like Nakobe Dean has these tremendous instincts that you can't teach. It doesn't matter how athletic you are if you're taking false steps at linebacker. You erase that athletic advantage, and I think that's sort of what has happened with Davion Taylor. But, you know, he'll get one more chance, especially if they don't add somebody, because he has to get one more chance, basically, because there's nobody else.
Now, new coach, new linebacker coach, clean slate. You've got Nick Sirianni as the head coach, but you got a new DC and a new positional coach for the linebackers this year. Does what he did 2 years ago when he got the chance to actually play a little bit, made a couple of plays. Not many, but at least some. Last year, not even good enough to beat out Sean Bradley and asked to go to the practice squad. All these guys start with a clean slate with the new DC and the new linebacker coach?
Yeah, I think the younger players and the guys who aren't entrenched, obviously the veterans.
Well, what do you consider Bradley and Davion?
No, they have a clean slate with this. And that's one of the positive things of new coaches, to be honest, because sometimes, you know, you can write a guy off And, Brandon Graham's a perfect example of this. Now, I don't want to, Chip Kelly was ready to cut him. Famous story. He was written off, and only because Travis Long tore his ACL is the only reason Brandon Graham got a chance to stay and ultimately take off. Sometimes you write guys off and they shouldn't be written off. They're late bloomers for whatever reason. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Daveyon Taylor or Sean Bradley, but I think it's a good thing when you have new coaches and they will new eyeballs on a player. And, NFL players are all talented. Every single one of them, all talented. So, can they find a switch? Who knows? You better hope so.
Yeah, at the linebacker position with this group, hope is running high because there are snaps available to be gotten as of right now with the Eagles roster being what it is and the depth chart being what it is, which is one of the questions I want to ask about when we get Dave Zingara up here. Eagles depth chart. Johnny Mack's got his. Jody Mack's got his. A lot of other outlets have theirs. The Eagles put one out once they start their offseason activities. How much thought do they actually put into it? Is there a lost leader every once in a while there on the depth chart that is released by the Eagles? It's just one of many things we're going to talk about with Dave Zingara from NBC Sports Philly. He joins next on Birds 365.
Weather